Security and Development, or ICOS, made a controversial claim that the Taliban had a permanent presence across 54% of Afghanistan. This year, the council says that presence has spread to 72% of the country. It's come to that estimate by building a database of Taliban attacks and talking to locals about their perceptions of Taliban activity in their villages and cities. The ICOS report says the Taliban is winning ground and even moving into the capital, Kabul, because it's doing everything better. The Taliban's political, military, and economic strategies are now more successful than the West's, it says. It credits the Taliban's military effectiveness with the increased use of guerrilla tactics, like improvised explosive devices, while it says international forces don't have enough troops on the ground, and some countries are held back by complex rules of engagement.
The kind of lumbering military machine trying to fight this fleet-footed and agile foe, I think has led to this situation.
And ICOS says there is no military solution in Afghanistan.
We really now need to start focusing on the non-violent security instruments. That would be education, microfinance, provision of jobs, trying to give angry young men within the country hope.
British and Afghan officials in Kabul criticize the report's methodology and reject the 72% figure, insisting it doesn't accurately represent conditions in the country. But the British government and America's next president, Barack Obama, have already declared their policies in Afghanistan will change, both with more troops likely and a greater emphasis on winning hearts and minds. Atiya Bowie, CNN.
Well, for a closer look at the report about the Taliban insurgency and just how far it might have spread, we're joined by Norine MacDonald, the president and lead field researcher of the International Council on Security and Development, the international think tank that issued that report. If your report is correct, NATO and US strategy, it seems, is an out-and-out failure.
Well, certainly the numbers in our report are very dramatic and I think cause for concern. And what we've said in the report is those numbers should be taken seriously and should lead to a very substantial reassessment of our security strategy in Afghanistan.
So are we talking about the Taliban running 75% and near 72% or near three-quarters of the country, or just established in 72%? So that's very different, isn't it?
Absolutely. What we've tracked is what we call permanent presence. So we've marked on a map day by day this last year the publicly reported Taliban attacks. And if there's an average of one attack or more per week over the course of the year, we've said that that's an area of permanent presence. And then we also have been interviewing Afghans over the last year and asking them to tell us where they believe there is a Taliban presence. So it's a combination of a fact-based calculation and also based on local perceptions. I
don't suppose that you were surprised that the US and UK don't agree with your report. Colonel Greg Julian of the US forces in Afghanistan said, and I quote, "We don't agree with the assessment that the Taliban have a permanent presence in some 70% of Afghanistan. A few spectacular attacks have created the perception of increased insurgent capability and overall insecurity." So they don't buy this at all.
Yeah, and we actually haven't seen their assessment or their numbers or their methodology. And as I said, I'll go back to, we're basing this on public records from third parties of the attacks, where they are in their regularity, and the perceptions of Afghans on the ground. I don't think there's any argument, though, that the security situation has deteriorated dramatically, that there's a Taliban presence closing in on Kabul. The American military themselves has said that their the first part of the new American surge is going to be around Kabul city, rather than in the south, where I think a lot of us had hoped they would be reinforcing the military. So I think in the fact that they're going around Kabul city with that first troop surge really validates the statistics in our report.
Well, Obama hasn't responded to this report, and we wouldn't expect him to have done that as president-elect as of yet, but he's certainly concerned and has made his point very clear about Afghanistan and what needs to be done. And he said, and I quote, "Part of the problem that we've had is the average Afghan farmer hasn't seen any improvement in his life. If we combine effective development, more effective military work, as well as more effective diplomacy, then I think that we can stabilize the situation." Does Obama's statement resonate with you?
Well, it echoes the recommendations in our report that we consider jobs and food aid as security instruments and give them the same political and financial support as is necessary for our traditional security instruments like military and intelligence. But we would emphasize in the report that there's a lot of focus on the new administration coming in, and that it would be really an error for us to be putting all of our hopes on Afghanistan being solved by a new American administration. And it's a collective responsibility, European responsibility, a regional responsibility, and we've seen, I think, a lot of neglect on the part of other players to actually really grasp the reality of the situation and the deterioration in Afghanistan and work on some new approaches to security there.
It's got to be said, your group has done as much, if not more, work on the ground in Afghanistan than perhaps any other. You know your stuff, you know what's going on the ground. Is this a lost war?
I don't believe it's lost yet, and I certainly, on behalf of my Afghan colleagues, don't want us to start going down this path, this idea that it's a lost war. Certainly, we can see that the Taliban are making some substantial political gains. They're forcing the West and the Afghan government to the negotiating table. And everybody's in favor of bringing in reconcilable Taliban into a democratic process. But one of the things I think that's good about this report is it's really given a bit of a shock to people about the deterioration of the situation, especially around Kabul. And we hope that means that there will be this review of our security architecture and embracing these new security instruments so that we can actually get back the momentum, take back the momentum from the Taliban.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
You're watching CNN Live from London. We're going to take a very short break. Back after this.